Yesterday, we continued our series here at Madison called Esther, God's Quiet Hand of Providence. And we opened up our Bibles to Esther chapter 5 and 6, and we looked at yesterday the incredible courage and clarity that Esther exhibited and the incredible faith and courage and humility that Mordecai exhibited. But what we talked about yesterday is the humility that we see from Mordecai and the courage and the faith of Esther that we see in a moment of pressure, all resulted from prayer and fasting that she had called for in Esther chapter 4, verse 16. If you remember the context of what had happened before verse 16 in chapter 4, is that Haman had this very evil plot to destroy the human race, and he convinced King Ahasuerus to actually sign this decree, putting his signet ring on it, making it a law that could not be changed. And so when Esther and Mordecai found out about this, this is what she had called the people to do, is to get together to pray and to fast. And so then we get into chapter 5, and what we see is that Esther walks into the king's throne room unannounced and uninvited. This is not something that you did, and so this is an incredible act of courage for her to walk in. And of course, as we know, she walks in and he holds out that golden scepter and even says that, Esther, you've had such favor in my sight that I will give you even up to half the kingdom if you want it. It's amazing she didn't even ask for that, but God ended up delivering that and even made that as an opportunity. But that's not what she was after. What she was after was actually the rescue and the salvation of her people, the Jewish people. And so what's interesting about Esther, instead of just blurting out what Haman did from the very beginning, she shows incredible patience and clarity and actually decides to wait. She knows that the king likes parties, but she also knows that she wants Haman to have to sit right in front of the king when he finds out that this was just an evil plot to destroy her people. And so she comes up with this wonderful idea to throw a meal and a party and this banquet and to invite Haman to it. And what's amazing as we fast forward the story, that Mordecai ends up being finally rewarded for the incredible act of faith that he exhibited when he had went to the king and told him that there was these two guys that want to kill him. The king's wanting to celebrate him and to parade him through the streets. Haman thinks it's supposed to be him. But even when he has this moment where he is elevated and he is praised, he doesn't let it get to his head. We talked about yesterday that before it and after it, right after the difficulty and right after this awesome news, he still goes back to the king's gate and he goes back to work. I want you to notice the courage and the clarity and the conviction that Esther had, but also the humility and the courage and the clarity that Mordecai had. As we looked at yesterday, this was the result of their faith in God and the spiritual discipline of prayer and fasting. Yesterday, the action step was to choose a 7-day prayer and fasting for you, maybe even for you and your family. And we talked about yesterday is that fasting is one of those things that is, as one person said, one of the most misunderstood, misrepresented, and under-practiced spiritual disciplines that's in the Bible. If you go throughout Scripture, you see any big-time decision, whether it was Daniel, Esther, Jesus, even the church in Acts, when they had a big-time decision, they were going into a new ministry or whatever it was, they always had one thing in common, is that they prayed and they fasted. And I think part of the reason why we have sometimes like a negative or a different thought towards fasting is because of what we see in Matthew 6, when Jesus said, when you fast, don't be like the hypocrites. He is, yes, giving a negative example of that, but twice in that text, he says, when you do it, don't do it like this, but when you do fast, do it like that. He's saying when, assuming that we are actually going to fast. And fasting, what it really is at its core, is just refraining from something. It can be food, it can be social media, it could be, checking your fantasy baseball team, whatever it is. Refraining from something that you usually do and to replace that with God in order to build a dependence on Him and to focus on Him. And so what we talked about yesterday is to pick something that maybe you're struggling with temptation. And so one of the things that that you find yourself doing a lot is just grabbing your phone, getting on social media. Instead of doing that, the moment that you feel that inclination to get online, replace it with prayer. And pray about something that you need to grow in or be better at. And the other thing we talked about is that fasting throughout the Bible was also one of the things that was used anytime there was a big time decision. Maybe you're at a spot in your life that you have a really big time decision. Never disconnect that big time decision from prayer and fasting. That the moment that maybe you're tempted to eat something or to find your comfort in that, or maybe it's to get on your phone to look at something, replace that with prayer and pray about that decision. I think you'll be amazed at the clarity, the courage, the conviction, the humility that you will have, just like Esther and Mordecai. I hope you guys have a great week, and we'll see you on Wednesday.